Good morning. Welcome all the participants to this global annual energy meeting. Let me remind you that this is the 10th edition of our global annual energy meeting. This is a unique event that is held first edition in 2011 in Madrid, just 2 years after the center, the EsadeGeo Center, was created. Since 2011, the Global Energy Meeting has established itself as a forum of reference where business leaders, policymakers, analysts discuss how energy technologies, geopolitics, and regulation will affect business and society. I would like to thank warmly the two sponsors of this event. I would like to do it with Into Energy, European Commission representation in Madrid, which are always have been with us, and as well as the main supporters of our center, which are Obra Social La Caixa and the Repsol Foundation. Of this year, record high energy prices as a result of supply issues across the European. So we must accelerate the energy transition to green energy. Therefore, our focus this particular year will be on the energy transition, its opportunities, as well as its risks. For that reason, we have called this year edition Fit for 25, accelerating the energy transition and the reindustrialization of Europe. The European Union has shown leadership in committing to the energy transition with the announcement of the European Green Deal and the Fit for 25 package. The European Union has showed ambition to becoming the first climate neutral continent by 2050. Decarbonizing the EU's industry presents great economic, social, and geopolitical opportunities. However, this transition also presents risk, including likely social implications. Our task is obviously to reduce the risk by making sure that the transition is fair and is socially inclusive. The energy transition is not only a domestic matter to the European Union, it's also an external or has an external dimension. All of these issues will be tackled in this year edition, in this present session. Our first session today features keynote speeches by two top leaders on this field in the European Union, and then a panel of discussion with significantly important people from the world of companies related to the topics we're dealing with today. Well, let's start by introducing you somebody who doesn't need to be introduced. Frans Timmermans, one of the most important commissioners of this period and the previous period also, was also in charge of matters pertaining to climate change and energy. He's a hardworking man. He's a very serious man, and if I were to tell my truth, I think is one of the most important commissions of this period of time. It's accompanied in the session with the minister, vice president of the government of Spain, and the minister of energy, Teresa Ribera. So with that, it's a pleasure to also introduce Diego Padilla, the director of InnoEnergy, will be moderating the conversation between Frans and Teresa. Well, without any further ado, Frans, if you are ready, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for coming, for joining us, and it's a pity that we have to do it through this without having the possibility of shaking hands. Looking forward to seeing you physically and not only technologically.
Well, thank you very much, Javier, for this kind introduction. And indeed, I would have much preferred to be in Madrid in person. Teresa knows also how much I love the city and how much I love coming to Spain. I don't think there's any other member state I've been to more in the past years. Javier, since you did this kind introduction, I cannot avoid starting with the topic that has all of us very nervous, which is the tensions on this continent with Russia. And I wanted to start with that, not to go into a deep analysis of how to get out of this, of et cetera, but I believe that in the discussion, too much is focused on the person of President Putin, his personal motivations, his vision for Russia, and too little is paid attention to the backgrounds of why he and Russia are acting in this way. And I believe much has to do with energy. Much has to do with energy, with the climate crisis, and with the energy transition. The loss of the disappearance of permafrost in Siberia in the north of Russia has huge consequences for physical infrastructure that is built on permafrost. You can imagine that. And much of that infrastructure is part of the Russian economy because it's linked to the energy sector. Secondly, Russia is hit with a lot of consequences of the climate crisis. Wildfires, harvests going wrong, and this is leading to dissatisfaction in the population, obviously. But most importantly, a country like Russia, so dependent on fossil fuels, sees what's coming, which is the fundamental energy transition, combined with an incredible acceleration of technological development. And on both fronts, Russia has big questions to answer. How is their economy going to be structured in a post-carbon-based world? Can they keep up with technological developments? I thought I'd mention this to you, Javier, and to your audience, because I believe it underscores the point that whenever you talk about energy, you talk about fundamental geopolitical and geostrategic questions. And this is something we need to understand also as Europeans when we discuss the issue of Fit for 55, as you said, the issue of energy transition. You know, it was 2 years ago that I was in Madrid for the COP25 conference. And at the same time, I was traveling back and forth to Brussels because there we were presenting the first proposal of the new Commission, which was the European Green Deal. And we needed a new growth strategy, taking into account the climate crisis, the biodiversity loss, taking into account the industrial revolution we're in right now. And I remember this was a very strange time for us in Madrid, and Teresa will remember, because we at the EU seem to be the only ones going into that direction. And many were saying we were overambitious. And this was sort of pie in the sky with the American president at the time even denying the climate crisis. Now, 2 years later, we see that the world is collectively almost moving in that direction. I think there is a global consensus now on the need to limit climate change to 1.5 degrees. That's what we agreed in Glasgow. And there is also an understanding that the major emitters need to do more to reduce their emissions if we want to have a chance of keeping it at 1.5 degrees. Glasgow also delivered a clear signal on the end of the coal era. And in the EU, our Green Deal has taken shape through our package of policy proposals called, as you said, Javier, Fit for 55. So the energy transition is advancing. In 2020, the share of gross final energy consumption from renewable sources reached 22%, 2% points above our EU target. All countries, with the exception of one, achieved their national target. All but 4 even overachieved their national target. In the same year, 37% of gross electricity consumption in the EU was covered by renewable energy sources. In already 6 member states, more than half of the energy is renewable. Solar power covered 14%. In 2008, it only accounted for 1% of the electricity consumed in the EU. And I think that's a spectacular growth. What is also positive, in my view, is that the support for the Green Deal remains strong. Even in the most recent Eurobarometer, we have 85% of all Europeans who consider that increasing renewable energy and energy efficiency are important or very important. 87% of our citizens who are between the age of 15 and 24 think it is important to make Europe the world's first climate neutral continent by 2050. Well, that's not a surprise. They will be in the strength years of their lives by that. So underpinned by these strengths, I think our political resolve to set Europe on the path to climate neutrality is still very, very strong. And even if the pandemic forced us into a lockdown and created deep economic crises from which we still have to recover, but from which we are recovering, I think Spain is a case in point because we showed European solidarity and we understood we should not repeat the mistakes of previous crises, such as the one in 2008. Our leaders boldly decided that economic recovery after COVID should be based on a green economic transformation, on the digital transition, and that we should dip into our reserves to make that happen through Next Generation EU and also other budget choices we made. At the same time, the regulatory agenda we laid out in the European Green Deal was brought forward as we had planned. In last June, a climate law was adopted. So the climate law makes our reduction targets legal requirements, and it safeguards the direction of our journey and provides clarity to businesses and investors and avoids us from being distracted with events such as what's now happening in Ukraine. We still stay on course because we are legally obliged to do that. We follow this up with what is probably the most comprehensive legislative framework in the world to address the climate crisis. I spoke in the Major Economies Forum yesterday, and we are really the only ones who have this plan, the so-called Fit for 55. It shows that our targets are ambitious, that it's going to be very hard to get them done, but still that it's feasible. It indicates how we can achieve all this fairly through a balanced mix of strength and expanded carbon pricing targets, standards, and support measures. It's all about putting a price on carbon. Allow me just 3 side comments on this package. First, I think it builds on very strong foundations. Many of the changes we make are tried and tested policies. The current legislative framework to reduce emissions already works because since 1990, European emissions have gone down by more than 20%, while our economy has grown more than 60%. So European industry has reduced its emissions by more than 30% over the last 15 years. So it can be done. But can we accelerate? Yes, we can, but only if we do not leave anyone behind. And Javier, you made that remark in your introductory comments. I think this is the crucial test. So our policy proposals have to go hand in hand with a commitment to a socially fair transition. Only if we can convince our citizens to be part of this transition will we succeed. And we can only convince them if they see this transition as fair and that they can be part of this and that we leave no one behind. And also fair in our relationship with international partners. And finally, my under the package, my clear understanding is that European industry is a key part of the solution. Through their investments in green technologies and innovation, their long-term plans, European companies can drive the green transition while growing their activities and creating new green jobs. So that's why we have proposed a substantial increase of the Innovation Fund to bridge the investment gap in low carbon innovation. And Spanish companies, by the way, have been among the first to benefit from this mechanism. This is also why we want to protect companies from carbon leakage with the carbon border adjustment mechanism, the so-called CBAM, so that if we put a price on carbon, we do not create a situation that others don't, and then our industry would leave to other parts of the world to continue producing and still emitting a lot of carbon. So we have to protect our industry against that, and we have to make sure that others follow suit. And I have to tell you, even with CBAM not being in place, others are reacting to this. When Turkey says we've ratified Paris because we don't want to be covered by CBAM, when the Russians say we're introducing elements of pricing carbon because of CBAM, CBAM is already working, even if it's not in place yet. But implementation is now. It's the Green Deal might be about the future, but today we need to implement. Today's economic prospects, today's political constraints, the changes have to be made now. And then we can analyze how far we can get. And the impacts of the changes for our citizens also need to be clear. And this is where we are today. In the here and now, very suspected, also because this COVID crisis is very hard to tackle. While the risk of collapsing aggregate demand was well managed, a multitude of factors have given rise to various supply-side disruptions, now reverberating through the system and have not yet worked themselves out. That leads to price tensions, as we can see everywhere, and this is hitting businesses' bottom lines and household incomes. Macroeconomic prospects have grown cloudier. Nowhere is this clearer, and nowhere is this having more impact consequences than in the energy sector, where geopolitical tensions have compounded the impact of the COVID recovery. This has caused sharp increases in prices, affecting millions and setting off political alarm bells just about anywhere in the world. And Spain was actually one of the first, and Teresa can write a book about it by now. But let's be frank, these are not the best starting conditions to set out for the long and challenging journey of the climate transition. But these are the conditions we have. We don't get to choose. And this is a journey we still must undertake. So the next few months will therefore be crucial. Will we be able to weather the storm and set forth? If we are, then I believe the environmental transition will be truly launched. The direction and the destination of our travel, no matter, the occasional zigzagging, will be set in stone, steering and harnessing the investment and innovation capacity of European businesses, offering a clear guide for Europe's constructive engagement with the rest of the world. But if we fail, then transition will be hobbled. Its rhythm set by the challenges we face and not the opportunities we are offered. Uncertainty will be pervasive, innovation and investment less focused and less forthcoming. And frankly, other parts of the world will move faster, and Europe will, as a whole, be left behind, not just parts of our society. So what does this mean in practice from our perspective? What do we have to do? Well, it's a long list and I don't have the time to go through all of them, but let me highlight 3 quick points. The first, of course, is the ongoing negotiations between the European Parliament and Council on our Fit for 55 proposals. We need to move fast. We are fortunate to have a French presidency of the Council that wants to move fast, and I see things moving even faster in the European Parliament, really encouraging this. I think we can do this. I think we can achieve it, and we need to come to a common position, hopefully by the end of the French presidency or by the beginning of the Czech presidency. Of course, we will listen to criticisms or anxieties on different elements of the package. We're open to changes, but we need to make sure we attain the target. And those who want things changed are under an obligation to tell us how we could then increase other reductions to still reach the target. The target is set in law, and anything we do in the changes of the package should keep us set on the target. Now, we need to avoid short-termism also in addressing the crisis with the energy prices. Clearly, the energy transition is not part of the problem, but rather part of the solution. The measures to address price spikes now must not end up affecting the long-term incentives for the energy transition. If we're clear on these principles, then we can have a discussion, as we are having constantly, as Teresa knows, with the Spanish authorities, on what this may mean concretely in terms of measures and in terms of fitness for purpose of our existing legislation. Well, finally, I would like to return to the issue of social fairness. As I said from the very beginning of my mandate, this transition will be just, or there will just be no transition. But if there is no transition, that doesn't mean the world will be fairer. On the contrary, A world where our climate and environmental challenges are left unaddressed is a world bound to become even more unequal and unfair. It's the poorest people, it's the poorest countries who have nowhere to go. If you look already at the effect of the climate crisis now, it's especially the countries who have absolutely no part in the emissions who are suffering most in the consequences of the crisis. Likewise, in society, in Europe, many of our people who have nowhere else to go will suffer more than rich people when we don't act now. So, conclusion, can we do this? Absolutely, we can. The way the EU was able to react in a united and powerful manner in the COVID crisis gives me confidence we can also do this here. So I look at the way we showed ourselves capable of responding to the urgency of the day, and we don't lose track of the urgency of a generation. I'm also optimistic because I look at Spain. I look at the way Spain responded to the crisis with an ambitious recovery and resilience plan. Not just ambitious, the quality of it is really excellent. I look at the way Spain has led all other member states in the implementation of the first set of milestones, allowing us to disperse 10 billion euros already last year. I'm optimistic because I look at the way Spain has been advancing its energy transition, being really a leader in setting ambitious targets and traditionally supporting the most progressive positions in the European Council. Finally, I look at Spain and I see that there's still so much youth unemployment that needs to be tackled, but also a young generation that has so much talent and that has so much potential in these new industries to be successful. We need every single person in Europe. You know, our demographics are clear. We'll have a shortage of people in the energy transition, in the refurbishment of buildings, in all sorts of sectors. This is a huge opportunity for our children if we teach them well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frans, for this wonderful speech, full of enthusiasm and full of hope. And that hope, I'm sure, they will be realized in a manner as the European Union can. Let me ask the Vice President of the government, Teresa Ribera, if you're ready. Teresa, great pleasure to see you.
A great pleasure to see you too, Javier, and a great pleasure to see and listen to Frans. And it is true that he's an enthusiast of Spain, and I think that that's a great thing also for us, as he knows he's always welcome in our country. So I hope next time we have a chance to see him here. But Javier, I was thinking that this initiative, so after so many years, it has been quite an institution in the discussion on the energy and geopolitics in Spain. But I was thinking that more than ever, probably, talking to business about energy in the context of a proper assessment of the geopolitics is particularly important. So I think that it could be particularly relevant, the conference you have organized today. I think that I'm sure that we will learn lots of things. My first message is that France is right. I think that the right answer in this difficult context is very precisely the Green Deal, the Fit for 55, the acceleration of our energy system, and the deep transformation of the economy and the parameters of how we produce and how we consume. So to be sure that our prosperity is long-lasting and sustainable all over the world, and Europe has much to say in this context. So I think it is good that we have already the time to assess and to think and to strategize what to do, being quite bold, and at the same time being quite flexible and humble, so to learn and to improve whatever we do at the national level, whatever we do at the aggregated level in the domestic action in Europe, but also when talking about the external action of Europe. So I think that it is good to say and to stress that in this context. As it is good also to stress that this was the answer that we got when facing the crisis, which was very different from the answer we got in the previous crisis. And I think that we can feel proud about these reactions. Things still need to fit in the small details, and I'm sure that we will have much work ahead of us. But I think that the broad picture is very well oriented, and I think that it is a good thing to ensure that this is the case. Then I come into the second idea. I think that in this context we need to be very clear also to any citizen and to be very transparent. I think that we need the support of citizens, the support of workers, the support of consumers. Everybody knows to understand that this is an investment, so to improve and to be sure about our own prosperity. But the changes that we are facing are so important, so deep, and is in such a short period of time that we need to pay attention to this. We cannot avoid people disconnecting or mistrusting what we do. And I think that this is an effort that we need to put in place together. So the different institutions, the different public and private players, the media, and so on and so on. So a particular effort to communicate and to explain and to pay attention to whatever concerns we hear from the different people and constituencies. See if we want to succeed. Because what we are discussing right now, it is not anymore a yes or a no. What we are discussing right now is how we do things and what are the impacts and the opportunities in the distributional effects of the different measures we put in place. So the discussion has dramatically changed. And I think that it is very important because it is a discussion on the effectiveness and discussion on the inclusiveness and the fairness of what we do. Paying particular attention, as I say, to ensure that people can experience the benefits of this transformation. Because in fact, this package, the Fit for 55 package, but the whole understanding at the European level on this transformation is key not only to respond to the current crisis and to face the transformation of the economic sectors. It is key for many other reasons. It is not just an issue of changing the color of the electrons or the molecules, but it is a question that deals with employment, skilling and reskilling. France, we had very good news yesterday about our employment rates, coming back to the best moments of the employment rates in our history. It is very good in order to update, to be much more effective and much more productive, reducing the consumption of raw materials and being very effective in the use of different inputs. It is very important in terms of ensuring fairness, as I said, so cohesion, territorial and social cohesion. It is very important in order to boost innovation. It is very important also in terms of ensuring a robust finance system. So to be sure that we have the tools in order to face the challenges that we will be facing in the decades to come. And it is quite promising, and it is very important, very enthusiastic for many people. But we need to be sure that things grow up in a proper way. So I would say that one of the issues that we need to pay attention is that in this current crisis, we need to be sure that whatever we do pays attention to the fact that we need to come along with social measures, as Frans was saying. If there is not a just transition, there will be no transition, and this is important because this deserves the solidarity between the member states, but also between the different constituencies within each member state. We need to accelerate the type of investments and the transformation of our energy system, and we need to be sure that we fit into what we will be needing in the coming years. So to invest in innovation. And I think that the three axes are quite important. And at the same time, we have a very, short-term concern that we need to take into consideration. Frans was commenting on that. I think that we know that this is something that is not a structural issue, but it is an issue. And we have to be ready to respond to what we are living today, because people do not feel that the right answer is to say invest because 2030 or 2040 or 2050. People need to be sure that we have the capacity to address the problems that come up, perhaps in an unexpected manner, but that impact their day-to-day life. So how we combine the consistency with the long-term objectives and strategic understanding of what we need to do, with the very short-term difficulties that we may be raising. And in that context, I would like to point out some references, so to be sure that we have a broader understanding of what we are experiencing right now. It's true that this crisis in Ukraine, which is probably one of the main issues in terms of the diplomatic efforts that we all are doing right now, has a very strong connection to the discussion on energy models and the external balance, the wealth of Russia, but also impacting in our economies. And this changes dramatically the kickoff of this new phase, this mandate of the Commission, this engagement from the European institutions in these years, because it consumes part of our energy and political attention. And what we see is that probably there are some references that we need to take into consideration in a very clear manner. We may be witnessing high prices in the natural gas. I don't know if to what extent or how high, but if China, India, and other big emerging countries to take seriously the energy transition and phase out coal, they may be asking for more natural gas. So even in the absence of this bilateral, or how to say, Russia-Ukraine crisis, we may be witnessing a higher demand, at least for a while, on natural gas impacting on prices. The second thing, so how long? Maybe a little bit longer than what we expected. The second thing, which is very important, is that I guess that the right answer is let's accelerate our transformation, but this is not something that happens from one day to the other. So how we deal with this new transitional period that has shortened in our capacities, and how we ensure that our response do not jeopardize what we have done and the right signals, but at the same time we pay attention to the fairness of the response that we need to provide. And I think that in that context, the response from the authorities has been to ensure our commitment to the people, to the households, and we need to pay attention to what extent, as Prime Minister Draghi was pointing out, we need also to count on the business community to see to what extent there are things that we should be treating in a different manner to be sure that the cost of this impact is properly addressed, and not only on the side of the taxpayers as something that has no consequence to anyone playing in the market, because I fear some disconnection if we do not take this much more seriously. The other thing is that my impression is that this also challenges the way we deal at Europe with the energy policy. There has been a great effort to work together on how we open much more broader vision on the challenges to come, how we can take into consideration the evolving conditions of the functioning of the different energy markets, or the energy reserves, the capacity to back up our consumption, and so on and so on. And it is interesting how deep the assessments are taking place, and how open the discussion is being. And I guess that this is also important, because there are many question marks that have no proper answers yet, but will be in our public agenda for a long period still. And the third thing, which I guess it is important, is that we need to be very, very bright in how we facilitate things. And facilitating things is also paying attention in innovative manners, how the European Investment Bank can facilitate access to finance, to guarantee PPAs and connect the industrial demand with the capacity to develop renewable plants all along Europe, or how we can facilitate the access to micro finance in order to facilitate the renovation wave or the different investments that can take place at different levels. So I think that there are collateral aspects that are also relevant in how we organize these things. What it is also an issue is how we can focus the type of discussions and the type of problems that we are facing. We had a very big problem dealing with natural gas, and because of the regulatory framework, this is also impacted in the electricity market. So to what extent we can mitigate this impact, and of course, understanding that we need to pay the cost of gas, but we should be lowering the pollution of the price, the increased cost of gas into the cost of electricity. These are issues that are part of the current discussion, both in the capitals and in Brussels. And I think that the engagement and the capacity to make constructive proposals from different players, both think tankers and academics, but also the business community, is really important. I insist not to jeopardize the signals, not to confuse on the main direction that we need to be pushing forward, and also not to jeopardize the economic capacity of Europe in order to invest in innovation, in social measures to make it easier, so to make it fair, and in acceleration of the energy transition model. I think that we will be having important discussions after these preliminary comments. So I think that I may stop here, and I'm waiting for our conversation and for further inputs from other participants in this discussion.
Thank you very much, Teresa, for your wonderful reflections. And as you have said, I will offer the floor to Diego Pavia, which is going to conduct the conversation, if I may say. Diego,
thank you, Javier. Thank you, Javier. Thank you, Vice President. So we have until 10:10 for question and answers, and we'll start with the chat from the public. And the first one goes to Vice President Timmermans, and is on the taxonomy, of course, and why gas and nuclear had made their way into the taxonomy, because that somehow gives a signal of dilution of the direction and the speed to crowd out non-renewable sources. So what will be your...
Well, first, let me say what taxonomy actually is, because I see all sorts of comments being made that we would now give subsidies to this or that. Taxonomy is guidance to private investors and institutional investors. The real green taxonomy, obviously, is renewables. And that's what we have already decided and put on the table, and that's already being supported. Now, we also know that in the transition to renewables, quite a number of our member states will be incapable to move, for instance, from coal directly into renewables and have enough baseload in their energy system. So these member states will need natural gas as a transitional energy carrier. Now, if we then would define the conditions under which natural gas is a transitional energy carrier, and the infrastructure needed for that is then pre-fitted to carry gases with other densities that do not have CO2 risks, such as green hydrogen, then of course this investment can be good for our energy transition. But the whole idea is that we look at both natural gas and nuclear energy as part of the baseload necessary for Europe in the transition. So it's not, in my view, it's not giving them a green label, but it's giving them the label of instruments we need to transit out of the present situation into a situation where Europe would be fully renewable. That's the background of the discussion. Decisions will have to be taken soon. Well, we'll see. This is also still an internal matter in the Commission that needs to be discussed.
Yeah, thank you, Vice President. And as you rightly say, base load is a key word that sometimes people forget. That industry, they need 24/7 to run their processes, and not all technologies are capable of supplying that energy. So second question would go to Vice President Ribera, is also on that topic. So Spain is very well fitted for the additionality principle. So when we have to produce green molecules of hydrogen for abating steel or fertilizers, and then you need new renewable, and Spain is perfectly fitted for sun, but of course you need 24/7. So how do you want to capture this new framework, regulatory framework, to attract the transformation of those steel, fertilizers industries, even to reshore to Spain potentially, because there they can find additional renewable quite easily. We have got land, we have got sun, we have got wind, and also potentially storage. What is the Spanish government ambition on this?
Thank you, Diego, for the question, and thanks, Frans, for your very nice comments at the beginning, because I'm going to try to connect with your previous comments on what we were doing in Spain. We thought that it was good to have a strategic understanding, very transparent, so reachable to anyone in the website. So it is low, and for the time being, 8 key strategic pieces, so to be sure that the national integrated energy and climate plan can deliver as we wanted. On new renewables, green hydrogen, on storage, and so on and so on. What we think, as I say, is that this is a very important piece, so to work on industry, employment, and so on and so on. But what we also thought was that we should be dedicating our investments, and in order to do so, we should reinforce the environment, the capacity to host those investments, to facilitate storage instead of natural gas as backup. Of course, we need natural gas for the time being. We need interconnections, so to ensure that the system is reliable. But it is also interesting to see to what extent storage can facilitate the great and quick penetration of renewable energy up to the system, up to 100% of the system, counting on the different technologies that we can use or that we can invest to develop in the time to come, and counting on a new framework to regulate how the storage is part of the system. This is something that we need, we know we all need. This is something that, because of our conditions, geographical conditions, we may need before than others. So that's also an asset in terms of leading some of these aspects. This is why we try to combine green hydrogen, the deployment of traditional and new renewable energy solutions, digitalization and efficiency with storage. And I think that it is important also to provide the consistency between the different pieces, and this is also why when figuring out what should be the main lines of our recovery plan, all these pieces are reflected with high ambition, because we think that it is not only an issue of having the theoretical assessment on how to reach things that can guide and can avoid mistakes in the time to come, so not to divest from the main direction, but at the same time, we should be boosting all these solutions, and we thought that it was a very good way to invest, to use the public money, to provide the signals, to facilitate the full engagement of the different private players. And that's what we are perceiving, a high interest from industrial players, but also a high interest from different investors.
Thank you, Teresa. Well, I see that Vice President Timmermans is answering on the chat to the different questions. So I will put new ones because the famous time to market of nuclear is beyond our age, I would say. So let's go to the link between Fit for 55 and industry. So at the same time, Fit for 55 is on the table in discussion. The Commission has identified 14 ecosystems or 14 value chains that should capture also the opportunities that the Green Deal and Fit for 55 puts on the table. but we don't see a real connection between the two very key political messages and signals that will make that happen. And I take the example of PV. If we're going to deploy 20, 30 gigas of PV per year to reach the 40% 2030, that will create a tremendous demand of modules, of cells, of wafers, of polysilicon. But today, we import everything. So how are we going to make that supply be sourced from Europe instead of just importing more from Asia and paying more imports? Is there any roadmap to make that happen, like a PV made in Europe? Because that's an opportunity to create a lot of GDP and employment. Can you elaborate on this? Any or both?
Well, if I could just make a few comments. Take batteries, for example. The European car industry, but broader industry, had neglected the need for batteries for a long, long time. So Asia took a lead that is incredible. And now at this stage, if you look at the huge increase of EV sales, last year more EVs were sold than diesel cars. Who would have thought that possible a couple of years ago? But all these batteries are Asian. And that's why we decided to develop a European battery strategy. And that's now, putting all the technology developments, aligning them at a European scale, putting people together to develop this, coming up with new ideas, decreasing our resilience on rare earth and other raw materials we don't have in Europe, developing the idea of solid state batteries that are lighter and can carry more energy than the present batteries and also offer less security risks. All this is now happening in Europe. And I believe that we will catch up and even some Asian developments, or work closely together with Asians so that we share the burden of this. I believe we can increase our European resilience, but I don't believe we can be fully self-sustaining in these areas either. We need to work with our neighbors broadly. To give you gave the example of PVs. If I take solar energy as a whole and combine it with the enormous needs of hydrogen that will be necessary for European industry in the future, we can only get there if we work together with Africa, both North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, where the potential for solar, given solar is the cheapest energy humanity has ever had and probably will ever have. Solar has so much potential, but then you have to be able to build the solar panels, to develop new solar panel technologies, to create new forms of integrating PV technology into also old buildings and protected buildings. All these things offer huge opportunity if we, like in the batteries, we put our efforts together as Europeans and we look for more resilience. And I want to emphasize the two sides of this. We need to have more European resilience and be able to produce more and also use our own natural resources more. And at the same time, this isn't a protectionist agenda, because we will also need our international partners to make this happen. And it's also in our interest that they can develop. Again, let me insist on Africa for 1 minute. 600 million people have no access to electricity in Africa. And at the same time, people are in the possession of mobile phones at a level that it's incredible. These two things coexist. How can we help them avoid the mistakes we made in our energy procurement in the past? By helping them with PVs, by helping them with offshore wind, by giving them the opportunity to democratize energy resourcing. Solar energy, you can bring it to any village in Africa and make the village owner and custodian of their own energy resources. I think these opportunities are wonderful, and Europe should be leading in these technologies, and we can if we put our efforts together. Let me stop here.
Yeah, so if I may react before Teresa reacts on your comment. If we take the batteries, as you said, as a blueprint for doing things right, by the way, our company was mandated by Zefcovic to run the Battery Alliance. In the PV Vice President, there's an opportunity now in the communication that the Commission is doing this June about PV And we're able, without being protectionist, to drive the manufacturing to Europe, also thanks to the regulation that we issued 12 months ago about the traceability of the battery and about 50% of the content to be recycled. And by those two measures, then industry started to manufacture in Europe. Let's do the same with PV. It's very easy, and June will be the perfect date to put that on paper. Yeah. Teresa, any comment on?
Well, I think that I can align with what you have both said. I could add a few complementary comments. One of them is that we need so much innovation in so many steps in the whole value chain we should be concentrating our efforts on how we can combine and how we can raise and use our capacities to develop what it is still needed instead of competing for what it is already available. It's true at the same time that we count on industrial capacities in most of the value chain, and it is true that there may be a strong need to go beyond the current performance in many of these aspects. So this is open to cooperate and innovate together and to work on us. And at the same time, it is also true that we should be building, and the renewable energy revolution allows us to do so, a much more collaborative understanding of the prosperity and the world instead of fighting for scarce resources. Final comment on this point. I think that yes, quality, performance are good standards. So to raise the effective use and efficient use of the different materials. So that part that also links to the economies, circular economy, and other references in our Green Deal agenda. But second thing, we need to pay attention to two aspects that we also have in our own pipeline as pieces of the energy and environment regulation and agendas. The sustainable use of resources, so mining and so on, and the final use of the goods and equipment being used in this new energy model. Because we know what it is happening with the rates whenever the wind generators are over their time. We know what it may be happening with all the electronics in the PV solutions, and what it can happen whenever it starts to happen this massive end of use of the different batteries in the electricity mobility and the electrical mobility. And I think that we need to be ready to do so, and we are not still ready to do so in Europe. So we have how we can recover and handle use in a smart manner with no additional impacts in the environment. So I think that there is much to do, not to concentrate on why we should be fighting against the others. That could be my very general piece of advice in this context.
Yeah, one piece of news, Teresa, that might be good news for the whole audience is we have been able to produce industrially the first battery with 100% recycled materials. So we are 4 years ahead of the plans. So again, if we are focused, we can deliver. Another question is about the Innovation Fund. Both of you talked about Innovation Fund as one of the tools to be ahead of and to be the early movers on new things. The Innovation Fund is going to be beefed up in terms of firing power. Do you see doubling up the firing power or up to the 50 billion that people are talking around on the same scope of actuation of the Innovation Fund? Or do you see the Innovation Fund doing other things besides what it's doing today? Just accelerate.
Well, I think the Innovation Fund, since we put so much stock into it, and since the technologies are moving so fast, and solutions are coming from areas where we didn't see them first, we need to introduce maximum flexibility also in the Innovation Fund if we wanted to deliver on what we wanted to do. And let me make this more general point also on the basis of what you said. You know, this is the fastest industrial revolution humanity has ever seen. And it is at least as intrusive as the first industrial revolution. And we, because we're in the middle of it, we tend to underestimate its effects. And then if you want to study history and you look at the effects of the first industrial revolution, no stone was left unturned. And not just in the economy, also in politics, in society, in institutions. And this is exactly what's happening today. And if we as leaders, politicians, as industrialists don't understand that we are in a fundamental reorganization of all of society on a global scale, we will make mistakes. And in that context, we have to be very careful to look at new developments, those who are promising. Sometimes we will invest in something that then turns out not to deliver. But we have to have the flexibility, because we will be surprised in many areas. You know, the issues such as the solid state battery or such as the completely recyclable battery, unthinkable 3 years ago, 4 years ago, unthinkable, or just theoretically thinkable. It's there. Steel produced with hydrogen, unthinkable a couple of years ago. It's happening in Sweden. You know, so that's why I believe we need to introduce enough flexibility in the innovation fund to be able to react to some of these fundamental changes in what's happening in our surroundings.
Thank you. Appreciated answer. Social fund. Both of you said that if the transition is not just, there will be no transition. And there are many questions on the chat on social fund. Have you sized how much this social fund should be in terms of billions of euros to be able to serve the transition? Just a number?
I think this is another question for me, Teresa. Yes, we have. Now, in the negotiations with Parliament and Council, we will first have to see whether we can get enough support for the idea of an emissions trading system dedicated to transport and housing. Why did we come up with that idea? Because we see emissions in transport going up, not going down, and we see energy use of housing not reduced in the way that is necessary to meet our targets. Only half of what we need to achieve is achieved. So we have looked at different models of doing this. You can do this through regulation, you can do this through taxation, or you can do this through market instrument, which is emissions trading system. And we came to the conclusion that this was the best way. But we also immediately saw that there is already energy poverty in Europe, and we would you have the risk of increasing that if the producers of energy who would be levied on when we put a price on carbon would immediately relay those costs to the consumers. And we have to make sure that our citizens are not victims of that, so that their energy poverty, especially now with we see the consequence of high energy prices. It is affecting poorer households in a horrible way, as we see. Also because very often it's the poorest households who have the most energy-consuming modes of transport and who have the most energy-consuming homes. So you then have to be able to have enough money to support them in that transition so that they don't fall victim to it. Now, if the system is to work as we have designed it, then, and member states would also match the money coming in from the emissions trading system, we would have more than 140 billion euros to address the issue of energy poverty. And in our view, if you do it right, that would be enough to compensate citizens for the transition and the risk of energy poverty. Having said that, one of the discussions we will see is to what level of percentage of the income in the ETS system for housing and transport would be put in the climate social fund. I think we've said 25%, but that might be another percentage, and you get even more or less money for the social climate fund. I believe this is the best way. You know, others are saying, "Whoa, we shouldn't be doing this." But then, how do you reduce emissions in transport? How do you make housing more energy efficient? And you know. By the way, which is something which is often forgotten, people who use electricity for heating or cooling, people who use city heating, for instance, people who, you know, for cooking and for heating, they are already in the ETS system. So it's not as though nobody who has a house or is unaffected by it today. Now it's people who use the most polluting energy sources who are not affected, and those who use electricity are. So it's also a matter of level playing field. But the crucial element is, will we be able to avoid energy poverty for our citizens? I think we can do this with the Climate Social Fund, but we still have a long way to go in negotiating with Parliament and member states.
But thank you, Vice President, because that's a very strong message. Hey, guys out there, this 140 billion euros, the size of this transition support, so there is nobody left behind, that will be partially filled by the ETSs, but also by the member states. So the number 140 billion euros, I think it should be making the headlines that, A, we're going to help the transition for everybody. Extremely strong message for everybody. Teresa, raw materials. So the whole green transition requires not oil and gas, but requires strange things: lithium, cobalt, nickel, rare earths, blah, blah, blah. And well, those things can be recycled, but first they have to be mined and processed. And we see, for example, in Spain, that there are lithium resources for our batteries and our transition to electromobility, but there is, the NIMBY, the not in my backyard, please, do that somewhere else. And at the end, we should not change our dependency from oil and gas to dependency on third parties' raw materials. Any plans to address this? I mean, the European Parliament last November, they issued a very strong message that yes, sustainable mining can be done in Europe, but then it has to be at the end the mines are in the member states. Is there a focus to harness this? We need raw materials, but citizens don't want the mines to be around the corner to be mined.
Thank you, Diego. But allow me to come back a little bit on this, on the social dimensions of what we are doing, both the social fund and the just transition, because we have very good news being made official yesterday. I think it is very important, the commitment, the explicit commitment of the European Union within the package, so to ensure that the social fairness is key and is one of the main drivers in the design of the framework, and addressing energy poverty is key, so that we connect with any citizen feeling threat by this transformation. So to me, it is important to be sure that the design works. It's not just the concept. I think that nobody challenged the concept. It is also the question of the design. And the transition is not dealing only with workers. It is also, as Frans was underlining, dealing with consumers and citizens. So we need to pay attention to this. Who pays first, how it is gradually, how we organize things, and who gets the benefits first. So I think that there are many things where we still had to work. And I was saying that that when properly designed, things tend to work. I remember how terrible it was to go to a very small village in Teruel to say that we were going to close one of the main coal thermal plants that had been the core, the soul of that area for decades. And yesterday, we confirmed that when making this big call for the just transition plans, so to provide solutions coming from private investment, taking into consideration the social, environment, and economic benefits for the region, we got 11 fantastic proposals coming from private investors and business developers. So whenever you design things in a right way, people is ready to respond, and we need to pay attention to those aspects. Then coming to the raw materials, yes, of course, I think that this is a key issue. I was saying that this is not only molecules and electrons; it is many things. It is also understanding what is our add value. We cannot change a dependency on fossil fuels to a dependency on technology or other type of raw materials. I mean, we think we need to ensure that we can make, as Frans was saying, the best possible use of what we already have in hand, reachable in hand. And I think that this appeals to something that we in Europe had forgotten, which is that we also had raw materials. So the big question mark is how to be sure that social and environmental aspects are properly treated. But the question is not to ban the use of raw materials and not to look into the potential or real effects that the access to those raw materials means in third countries. I think that this is very important. And I can assure you that this is not an easy discussion. It's more than a year that I've been trying to push this agenda internally and with conversations with different stakeholders, and people get nervous on that. So I think that we need to be very, very bold, very respectful, and to ensure that what we propose, it is trustful. And as I say, this is part of we want to promote a discussion and a strategic approach on what we have, what it means. We do not want either to be exporters of raw materials as it is. I think that it doesn't make sense either. I think that it is a key piece to build other add values within the industrial value chain. But I think that it is a timely discussion for the time to come, because the type of raw materials that we are already needing are different from the raw materials we used to need. So I think that we need to have a new approach and a new look into this file.
Thank you, Teresa. So last question to both of you before we wrap up is your dream. So now you're meeting a citizen having a beer in 2030, and you tell the beer taker with you, hey, we did it. Why would you tell him we did it? What will be that beer talking about in 2030? Frans?
Well, it's clear from my perspective, we made the targets we set out 10 years ago in Fit for 55. We made it. And I think that's entirely possible. Just to give you one example to perhaps bring also a bit more optimism into this. Would you have thought we would be where we are now with the car industry 2 years ago? Most of the car industry was fighting me with all their means when I said we need to go to the production of EVs, only production of EVs or zero emission cars by 2035. It was impossible. Now they have plans that even speed that up. If you look at the latest plans of platforms, also between Europe and Asia, it's so exciting to see that. If you see the way our citizens are embracing this, it's exciting to see that. And by 2030, we will see that electric cars are much cheaper than the old combustion engine cars. It will be accessible also to people with less means. We will have a second-hand market of those cars already in place. We will have put the charging infrastructure we promised everywhere. We will have increased our production of renewable energy substantially across the EU, solar especially, but also offshore wind. The latest offshore wind project off the coast of Scotland, they're paying the Scottish government to be allowed to build it. Who would have thought that 4 or 5 years ago, when we still needed to put massive subsidies into offshore wind? So there's reasons to be cheerful and optimistic also.
Totally. So you get the beer for free, Teresa?
Thank you. I think that we may be even happier because we could be saying we overdid. I think that we also France took some examples, but not only. I was thinking about solar rooftops. Our goal for 2030 was 9 gigas, and 2021 we did almost 5 gigas of solar rooftops. So I think that the change is not proportional. It can be impressively progressive in many different aspects, and we can discover new things that are there. Offshore wind or car industry or hydrogen are some of these pieces. But also when talking about skilling and reskilling, that could be also a very tricky question. What your daughter or your son works on, and then there will be new professions and new skills all over the countries. And I think that this is also very interesting to be ready for this change. And this is why, to my mind, it is so important to place this discussion as an agenda for opportunities and prosperity, and not allow that people use this agenda as an agenda to make fair or to threaten people or limiting people, because it is absolutely the other way around. It is an agenda to ensure that we can enjoy prosperity and fairness. So I think that this is what I would take. I don't know if beer is for Dutch people, but for the Spaniards it is more a little bit of wine. And France is midway. He can combine a little bit of good Dutch beer with good Spanish wine.
Well, I've seen that many Spanish people are very fond of cervecitas. It's not just a Dutch phenomenon anymore. And we produce, in my home province, we produce wine these days. That's one of the effects of climate change as well. But just one thing I wanted to echo, if you allow me, what Teresa said. What I want to say, if there are young Spanish people watching us today, many of whom are still in precarious jobs or don't have a job, none of them will be unemployed in the future. That is something we can be almost sure of. Nobody needs to be unemployed in 10 years' time, and even much faster. We need everyone. And the only thing is, we also have a responsibility of skilling and reskilling people so that they can take the jobs with them. We have a shortage of people who build solar panels, who build offshore wind sites. 2 million new jobs will be coming to Europe because of this transition. So, the levels of youth unemployment, especially in our Mediterranean area, are much too high, but we can solve that. That's worth the beer, I would say.
Totally. So we have a deal. In 8 years' time, there will be cervecitas, wine, and jamón. Jamón has to always be there because we'll be celebrating. So a message from industry, I could say I represent industry, is that, as you say, we will overachieve the 2030 goals by far. I mean, the snowball is just speeding up. And the good news is the social fund, because the only threat that we saw in the radar was that the transition, because of the spikes, will delay things. But if we smooth out with the social fund, it's a highway. So thanks a lot to both of you, Frans and Teresa. And in this note of extreme optimism, that is for me realism, then we close this first session. Thanks a lot.
It's my great pleasure to moderate this session called Assessing the Collective Impact of Fit for 55, a view from the industry. Earlier, we have seen the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans, and the Spanish Vice President, Teresa Ribera, focus in their keynote speeches on the mission of making Europe the world's first climate-neutral continent by 2050. And in order to get there, the Commission Fit for 55 package of legislative proposals offers a blueprint for reaching a 55% net emission reduction target by 2030 compared to 1990 levels instead of the previous 40% target. So a big increase in the ambition of Europe. And delivering on this increased ambition is expected to transform our energy systems. The European Union industry will experience a dramatic shift towards electrification and the deployment of low-carbon technologies, which could result in a 50% cumulative surge in power demand by 2030 in the UE, according to some analysts. This raises important questions related to the infrastructure and the investment, the innovation, technology, and at the same time, the importance of critical raw materials and batteries for energy storage cannot be ignored, as we have seen in the previous session. And our supply chains will need to be resilient. For industry, the Fit for 55 package is likely to create significant challenges to existing business models and operations, but also big opportunities for transformation. As VP Timmermans said, European industry is a key part of the solution. So, to cover this crucial topic, I have the great pleasure of welcoming a strong panel of 4 top industry executives from a diverse group of companies, all of them committed to energy transition and with a great passion for the topic, as I have seen in previous discussions. So we'll have representatives from Air Liquide Spain, Galp, Repsol, and Siemens Gamesa. They will provide their views on the impact of the Fit for 55 package on the European Union industries and whether it will enable the European Union to reach its climate targets. So let me introduce the 4 presenters and panelists. The first one will be Yosuyon Imaz. Yosuyon has been Chief Executive Officer of Repsol since 2014. He has led Repsol transformation process, which has established itself today as a global multi-energy company, a major player in the Spanish electricity and gas market, and a leader in the development of sustainable mobility solutions. Under his leadership, Repsol is the first company to commit to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. The second presenter will be Andreas Nauer. Andreas was appointed as CEO of Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy in June 2020. Mr. Nauer has a strong track record in the renewables industry with 11 years as CEO of Siemens Wind Power, as well as Repower Senvion. The third one will be Teresa Ribera, who joined the Air Liquide Group in 1996 after a previous experience in gas natural, and has held various positions of increasing responsibility in different areas. She has been General Secretary of the Air Liquide Group in Iberia and executive functions and board members. Since June 2016, she has held the position of President. And finally, Andy Brown, who became CEO of Galp in the beginning of 2021, before he enjoyed a 35-year international career with Royal Dutch Shell in 7 countries, responsible, amongst other things, for establishing and delivering Shell business in Qatar. And finally, during his last 7 years at Shell, he served on the executive committee building the world's largest integrated gas business and as upstream director. So with all these fantastic panelists, we will start our discussion. And just as a reminder, you will be able to ask any questions to the panelists by writing in the chat box, and we will answer them at the end of the session. So let's start with Yosuyon Imaz.
So thank you, Ivan. It's for me a great honor to be here and to share this panel with Teresa, with Andreas, and with Andy. I mean, let me start saying that I fully agree the main message coming from the Vice President of the European Commission and the Spanish Vice President. I mean, the reduction of CO2 emissions is a must. From the energy sector, we supply the energy our society needs, and which, as well as industry, agriculture, construction, and so on, contributes to this emission. And our duty is to fight global warming. That implies a transition from the current energy model to a decarbonized one. From Repsol, we fully support the proposed increase of the European Union climate targets for 2030 up to 55%. We believe that such an increased ambition requires both breakthrough technologies as well as policy frameworks. And the real challenge, let me say, is to approach this transition based on our industrial and technological capabilities without damaging our well-being, and in some way without damaging the dream of the next generation to build their own future. This is the challenge we face, an inclusive energy transition that doesn't leave anyone behind. You said, Ivan, in 2019, we were the first company in our sector worldwide to establish a clear commitment to reach net zero emissions by 2050. And let me say that from this clear commitment, I like, with great humbleness, to share some contributions on how to approach this energy transition, the decarbonization and transformation of our company, of course, but from the conviction that it's crucial to have a firm commitment with technology, and also with the defense of our industry in the European Union. I mean, let me start. First thought, we must guarantee the security of supply in this new context. What we are experiencing today in many European countries, I mean, very high electricity prices, problems to supply gas at reasonable prices, a CO2 price subject to financial speculation, is not acceptable. We must ensure that the transition is a real transition and not a disruptive revolution. And in order to achieve it, we must guarantee the operational and financial sustainability of oil and gas exploration, production, and transformation during this transition. Otherwise, families and industrial jobs, as well as society as a whole, will pay for the loss of competitiveness. I move to a second thought. We must not mistake decarbonization with electrification. Our goal should be to decarbonize the economy, not to electrify it. And decarbonization and electrification are not exactly the same, are not synonymous. Electricity is a part of the solution, but not the only one. There are sectors and energy uses that can be electrified, or where electricity is not the most, let me say, efficient solution. Electricity today is not a solution for planes, for trucks, for ships, for steel mills, cement plants, or for the chemical plants. So to reduce CO2 emissions, an inclusive approach is essential. It's crucial to guarantee we don't discard any option that allow us to move forward in the energy transition. The goal is to remove as many tons of CO2 as possible at the lowest cost for the society. And in this sense, we must avoid conceptual biases and determinism. And we have to ensure that decisions on the energy transition are taken from a technologically neutral point of view. Let me say that we need more technology and less ideology in this area. And to decarbonize sectors that can't be electrified with current technologies, the solution is either to decarbonize liquid fuels or to use decarbonized hydrogen in some industrial cases. Doing that, we could profit from the current oil, retail, and logistic infrastructures, as well as the current vehicle car fleet. And to accelerate this decarbonization process of liquid fuels that have increasingly lower emissions, I mean ecofuels, biofuels, synthetic fuels with no net emissions in their life cycle, it's a big mistake to ban the combustion engine. Increasing the bet on the electric car under the false axiom that it has no CO2 emissions, it doesn't make sense. Yes, it does have emissions, a lot of them, but we just sweep them under the carpet sending them to the mining in China or to the manufacture of batteries in other continents, greenwashing. Now I jump into a third thought. The European Union energy transition must be complemented with a strategy to promote the circular economy. Today, we can't speak about the energy transition without talking about circular economy. Plastics, urban wastes, biomass, farm residues are growing, and they could have an opportunity to contribute to decarbonize the world. And the proposed RED III directive has to be a key instrument to support the uptake of clean, low carbon, and renewable energy carriers. Repsol, we are transforming our refineries and chemical sites to develop new hubs where, embedded in this concept of circular economy, we use less and less oil as feedstock, and farm and forestry residues as products that feed the production of diesel, kerosene, and gasoline are growing. So without that decarbonization of liquids, there won't be a real decarbonization. And a fourth and last thought, it's essential that the regulatory framework really allows to reach the targets in a fair, cost-efficient, and competitive way. We have to ensure that industry maintains its competitiveness in Europe, and we have to protect our industrial sectors against unfair global competition. It's key that we maintain a global approach to the package in order to not to lose sight of European competitiveness in the world. As a reminder, the European Union accounted more or less than 8% of global emissions in 2019, and Spain for 0.9%. Europe can tackle alone the responsibility of fighting against climate change at any cost. China is more and more the main emitter. And when a steel plant closes in Europe and opens in Turkey or China, the climate problem is getting worse, and many people lose their jobs. So, conclusion, we fully embrace European Union's global leadership to fight global warming and climate change, leading the way of the energy transition. And again, with great humbleness, we encourage to avoid being naive, let me use the term, in the process, and to make the best of the opportunity to have a global approach of the decarbonization efforts. Fit for 55 and other regulation, in addition to achieving their climate objectives, must promote the reindustrialization of Europe through an efficient and just energy transition, protecting the welfare of our citizens. And let me say that in this case, the package will be a success. The future must be built by all of us, without exclusions, leaving no one behind, and allowing and encouraging all industries to do their homework is the way. Everyone is needed in this effort, and this is the meaning for me of the concept of a just transition. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Josuyon. You sent very positive, optimistic messages, but you also raised some important points, some key messages on the things we need to be aware. No, when you discuss about smart transition versus disruptive revolution, you mentioned global approach. We need to reduce emissions rather than moving emissions from one country to another. You mentioned also an important topic that decarbonization is more than electrification, and that we should not leave anyone behind, as we also in the previous presenters, Vice President Ribera and Vice President Timmermans also mentioned, and that we need a strong industry, a strong technology, and probably less ideology. There is something I would like you to answer, to discuss a little bit further. It is about transport. Transport is currently responsible for 30% of the European greenhouse emissions, and the Fit for 55 contains various proposals to address these emissions, no? And they are planning for a 50% reduction in road transport emissions. So for the passenger vehicle segment, and you already mentioned something in your presentation, for the passenger vehicle segment specifically, how should we manage the transition to carbon neutrality? What is the role that the internal combustion engine can still play?
I mean, interesting question, Ivan. In some way, I try to illustrate a bit a part of this point in the previous points. I mean, every single technology that helps to transition towards carbon neutrality matters, also in the transport sector. So we must not demonize the internal combustion vehicle. I mean, there is no need to be afraid of technological neutrality. It's not, of course, an excuse for not decarbonizing, for not fighting global warming. On the contrary, it opens up possibilities that complement electrification based on renewable sources. So, and for that, it's important to consider emissions in the entire value chain. I mean, the concept of net emissions, not just those from the tailpipe. Otherwise, we are, as I said, sweeping under the carpet the CO2 emissions, sending them to China. For instance, this very week, the European Parliament Industry Committee has debated a draft opinion on the regulation on CO2 emissions standards. The rapporteur of this issue was a French, Dominique Riquet, and this report supports the concept that emissions of cars are measured, or have to be measured, better said, in the whole cycle, in the life cycle, and not in the tailpipe. And the report also calls for more emphasis on supporting a panoply variety of transitional technology. So I think that is the way, being open. Fuels with a low or zero CO2 footprint make it possible. And thanks to them, we could advance in decarbonization by taking advantage of the existing vehicle fleets with internal combustion engines, as well as current infrastructure. And we have to take into account that the automotive sector is very important for the Spanish industry to create and to maintain jobs in our country. So being open, having a cost-efficient approach, betting in favor of carbon neutrality, but drawing the transition for this transport decarbonization in an inclusive way, leaving no one behind.
Good ending. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next presenter is going to be Andreas Nauen from Siemens Gamesa. No? And I think Siemens Gamesa is a fantastic example of the opportunities that the energy transition can bring to employment, to technology development. It is a great example of a company that has won a leadership position in the world of renewables. So Andreas Nauen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ivan. And first, many thanks for inviting me here. The best place to attend this would, of course, have been in person in Madrid. The second best would have been my office. And now, unfortunately, I have to do it from a car due to some urgent assignments. I still hope that everything works out and you can hear and see me in an okay way. Of course, we are extremely happy with the long-term outlooks in the wind industry. The Fit for 55 package, the Green Recovery Plan, they all show that we will have, and now I can't see myself, but never mind, I hope you can see me. Yep. And that, of course, we see enormous potential there in the long run. And the numbers are just impressive when you look at the expected huge expansion of wind to 450 gigawatts in Europe, up from 180 gigawatts. So that is just fantastic. And it's partly, of course, driven also by the situation of COVID and getting out of that crisis. But we can't ignore that this also has a very short-term impact that we currently see in our industry. We are battling with raw material price increases. We see a severe crisis at the moment with a big disruption in our supply chain. And I just counted this morning. I think we had 7 profit warnings now in the wind industry in the last 6 months. So clearly, you can see whereas we have fantastic opportunities in the long run, we have to get over this situation right now. I also believe that this is not only a short-term situation that we're currently in; it will also reset the balance in the value chain between our suppliers, between the wind OEMs, between our customers, and also in the end between the end consumer. Because what I see at the moment is, in the situation that we might not be able to do all the investments that we would like to do. Because the short term is so much at focus that the long term might get endangered. We don't see that at the moment, but I'm just nervous that the situation that we currently see lasts too long and that it might get very difficult. Nevertheless, I then would like to still address the huge opportunities that we have. And the announcement that we have now in Europe, in the various member states, and also the translation into, I normally call that operational rules, is going at a very nice speed. On the other hand, we still see bottlenecks in Europe. And as we all would like to keep that industry and keep the energy generation and keep wind in Europe, we need to become much better at what we do on a very practical level. We need to become faster in permitting in Europe. I see at the moment simply not in the long run, medium to long run, not enough projects coming up. Yes, there are these like ScotWind, what Mr. Timmermans mentioned earlier in his speech. There are, of course, good developments, but especially in onshore wind, I don't think we are fast enough to get all the volume, all the megawatts into projects that we would like, and that we also would need to electrify Europe, including also via green hydrogen. Also, there's not that is one important element. We still have to do a lot of investment into R&D. I think R&D, especially for the European companies, brought us into this fantastic and advanced position that we are in. We developed technology over the last 20 years in our industry that is now world leading. No other continent has that, and we need to continue to do that. And I see that especially in three areas. Of course, in what is core for Siemens Gamesa, that is making wind turbines. We have to make them even more efficient, even more durable, longer lifetime. We also have to make them fully recyclable. I think also there we get a huge step forward. Siemens Gamesa now already produces fully recyclable blades. And that's not the majority of what we do, but we can already do that. Then the third item, or the third sector that I see, is green hydrogen. We are developing now the technology of combining wind turbines with decentralized electrolyzers so that we do it most efficiently. And then the fourth sector is the advancement of offshore wind into floating wind. Also there, my company is world leading, but also that is at a very, very early stage still, and still needs a lot of investment to full industrialization. So maybe in short, at the moment, I think we are in quite a difficult situation that will have long-term impacts on the value chain and on the split between us and our customers, but the long-term prospects are just fantastic.
Good. So thank you very much for your speech and the situations you are having. I mean, we hear you perfectly and we watch you perfectly, so don't worry about that. I mean, you really mentioned something that is very important, that the fact that achieving 2030, 2050 targets requires a larger scale and faster development of renewable energy, no? And this has, as you say, significant challenges and opportunity to get the necessary volumes to materialize. Mm-hmm. No? Mm-hmm. You also mentioned this need for combining the short-term and the long-term approach, because as also the previous presenter, Yosuyon, said, I mean, this is a a transition. It's not something that we can achieve tomorrow. And you also raised some point that I think is very important, and we may talk later in the discussion, who is about the importance of R&D, the importance of innovation in order to go these faster and more important development of green energy. No? And you mentioned something also that is very important for me with the durability and the sustainability, the fact that we are avoiding the need for recycling. I mean that we use recyclable materials in the new turbines. So this is great, and this is very important. No? So for me, the question I would like is to ask you is very much related with that point, which are the main challenges and opportunities of the wind sector to contribute to the energy transition in the coming years and decades?
Yeah, thank you, Ivan, for the question. Yeah, I see that in various ways. First, of course, wind in general, or wind generation is something local, and that's also the big advantage. We are not, the wind cannot be imported, so we have to generate, and we can generate the electricity that we need in Europe. And as a consequence of that, we also, in order also for the society impact, we of course would like to also produce them in Europe. Because I think Teresa Ribera talked about the not in my backyard impact. I firmly believe, and that plays into the point of consenting, that European societies fully support renewables in the meantime. A big change to a few years ago. But of course, they would also like to see all the benefits, not only the green electricity generated, but also employment. And only if we can combine these two, then also I believe we will get support for all the projects that need to be consented, and then we can provide as a wind industry the support for the transition that is needed, provide the workplaces that we need in Europe, provide the green electricity that we want, and then from there go into the long term with a lot of green hydrogen and what come maybe in 10 years or so.
Mm-hmm. Good. We will discuss later more on this. Thank you very much again, Andreas. And the next presenter is Teresa Ribera, no, from Air Liquide. Teresa, welcome.
Hello, thank you very much, Ivan. Well, thank you for inviting me to this energy meeting. It's my honor to have the chance to participate in this and to share the roundtable with Josujon, Andreas, and Andy. As you say, Ivan, I am really passionate about energy transition and energy. And let me just a few words to introduce Air Liquide. I enjoy explaining that we focus on essential small molecules for life, matter, and energy, as oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen. And as you asked me, let me explain how the Fit for 55 package will impact our industrial activities, our industrial operation. We are supporting, Air Liquide is supporting the European Green Deal. Clearly, performance and sustainability are at the core of our strategy, and one of our key objectives is the abatement of CO2 emission for a low-carbon society. Our group commitment addresses the urgency of climate change, and we shared with Repsol the targeting of carbon neutrality by 2050, with key intermediary milestones in 2025 and 2035, of course. But this means a lot of transformation in our way of doing. This means increasing the use of low carbon electricity for operation, implementing innovative carbon capture technologies, optimizing our supply chains, improving obviously the energy efficiency, that is one of our key drivers for our production plant, and accelerating low carbon hydrogen production through electrolysis by also using renewable feedstock such as biomethane. As Josujon explained before, I think that decarbonization is not equal to electrification. There are a lot of technologies that we have to use during this energy transition. But we are not only reducing our carbon footprint, we are helping other industries to do the same, drawing our technological expertise and capacity for innovation. We are inventing cleaner, more sustainable solutions to reduce their emissions. And we are deploying low carbon solutions. We like to talk about the low carbon solutions for our clients, to help them to decrease the CO2 footprint. And our obsession is to accompany them in their industrial process transformation. For example, we are working with the steel industry to use hydrogen in this process, but also to reduce CO2 emissions. But if we have now one key goal is to accelerate hydrogen. We are convinced that hydrogen is a cornerstone of the energy transition. It offers a tremendous growth potential as a competitive low-carbon solution for many applications in the industrial, energy, and mobility sectors. We are deeply convinced that hydrogen will play a major role in the energy transition, and we want to be a key enabler of the hydrogen society, thanks to our assets, technology, and our passion and our expertise. But on top of that, we want to collaborate with our customer. We want to develop the hydrogen market based on solid alliance with other industrial groups. We are convinced that in this environment, collaborative is key. Collaboration is key. We can talk about our acceleration plan for hydrogen, how we want to at least triple our hydrogen turnover in order to reach more than 6 billion euros by 2035. But we are proud to say that Air Liquide is supporting the European Green Deal ambitions with our decarbonization plan, and also collaborating and working with our customer to identify most efficient product. But our challenge for all of us is how we can success in combating the climate change and at the same time strengthen our industry. We are convinced that Europe will need all available renewable and low carbon technologies. It's not just one technology. It's very different path that we have to develop. And if you allow me, after almost 1.5 years after the Hydrogen European Strategy publication, we have had a very positive political push toward hydrogen at the European level and also on the member state. But also in other geographies, Asia is moving and is moving fast. And from our point of view, there is an overall imbalance between positive political speech to promote the hydrogen economy and the reality of its execution to date. If I may to point out some subject, the need for harmonized definition of hydrogen based on the carbon footprint on a life cycle basis within is key. And another critical subject is the access to the renewable energy. Decarbonizing means decarbonizing the existing assets is as much as a priority, but also developing new clean hydrogen's capacities to new application. Really, a robust industrial policy to boost the European industry global competitiveness and secure long-term access to clean energy at competitive prices is key now for Europe. Europe industry can only transform if it is competitive. If you allow me, the industrial transformation and competitiveness are key for a successful Fit for 55 package. We are in front of a big challenge, but also a big opportunity. And as a matter of fact, we all, and I'm talking about states, companies, and individuals, we have the responsibility and the mission of building a sustainable future. But we have to do it now. We have to show that we are really moving on this direction. Ivan.
Good. So thank you very much, Teresa. I took note of 3 messages or 3 words. The first one is technology, insisted a lot that many technologies are going to be needed, and we need an important and fast technology development. The second word I noted was collaboration amongst industries, because this is not a silo mentality. This should put together many industries, different sectors, different technologies in order to produce the development that is needed, but also a lot of collaboration with customers, because if we don't have collaboration with the customers, we are not going to get where we want to go. And finally, also a message that I think is very important, the need for a robust industrial policy to boost competitiveness. So this is about, how to create industrial employment opportunities and how to make the ambition to become real, no? So very good messages. And now, being Air Liquide, I really would like you to focus a little bit more on the hydrogen and gas package, that has been released in December by the Commission as part of the Fit for 55, and to what extent is that package conducive to establishing a framework for decarbonizing and modernizing the gas sector of the coming years?
Mm-hmm. Well, we can see almost every day many projects or many announcements of projects to increase the hydrogen production capacity in Europe. A lot of companies are ready to invest. A lot of projects to be invested by private companies, industrial or mobility application to use this clean hydrogen are being developed. Almost every day we can see a new announcement in the newspaper. But that should be launched before we think of replacing the natural gas with hydrogen for other uses. I think that the package should take into account the current market reality. The gas package is anticipating the emergence of a European-wide backbone for hydrogen. We still don't be at this point. We need first a decision of the Commission on hydrogen production's IPCE in order to really accelerate this production project. And as I said before, we see some overall imbalance between a very, very positive political speech to promote the hydrogen economy and the reality of its execution to date. I think that the gas package, we need the harmonized definition of hydrogen that I said before. And something that I'm a little bit afraid, please, unnecessary over-regulation, no. It might be counterproductive. For example, imposing conditions on all hydrogen pipeline without taking into consideration the different uses of hydrogen and their specificities, because there are really different level of maturity per each market. So please regulate when it is needed and allow the market to move and allow the market to develop new application, new usage to make hydrogen a reality before an over-regulation that could stop this process.
Good. So regulation should be realistic.
Exactly.
Good. So thank you very much, Teresa. And now the final presenter is Andy Brown, coming from Galp. And this is a great example of, how the industry can be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And Andy comes from the upstream sector, and now he's fully committed to low carbon intensity business and for the green transition. So Andy.
Thank you, Ivan. And great to be talking on this forum. I have to first say that Galp fully endorses the Fit for 55, but also with the target to be net zero by 2050. We're talking about reducing our own emissions and the CO2 intensity of our own production by 40% by 2030. So, we're going from 0 to minus 40%. Europe's going from minus 28% to minus 55%. So we've got to realize that we've got to move even faster than Europe. And that's why we have a new purpose. The purpose is let's regenerate the future together. And we use the word together because I think this is a team sport. This is about government, this is about companies, this is about society all working together. And that is absolutely essential because, as Joshua said, the electricity system is one thing you have to decarbonize. But if you think, like in the world, about 20% of energy is delivered through electricity. In Iberia, 24%. Hey, there's 3/4 of the energy system still to be addressed. And of course, electrification, perhaps towards 50% of the total energy delivered, may be accomplished by 2050. But decarbonization is a much bigger, much more complex issue for us to address. And that's why its complexity and urgency is there. And that's why I think how these three parties, the companies, the government, society, can work together is going to be crucial. And as Joshua John said, it's not about demonizing the old. It's about stimulating the new energies. If we demonize and penalize the old, you get supply issues. And I think we see that today. We see an issue of the supply of affordable oil and gas, and as a consequence, also electricity. So stimulating new energies, this is a government role. Avoiding unhelpful things like the clawback in Spain. Clearly they want to cap upsides, but okay, let's talk about helping the downsides, because clearly long-term, as renewables get built up, curtailment becomes an issue in places like Iberia. So let's have regulations that balances those things. Governments also, as Andreas says, we have to speed up licensing in renewables. We have to speed it up. It is our most limiting factor in our renewable growth. We've got about a gigawatt now. We're going to 4 gigawatts by 2025 in Iberia. And the pace of that is most limited by the licensing. But also governments have to stimulate these new industries, particularly, for instance, battery value chains. We've seen regulations in Portugal in the last weeks around lithium mining. Again, this has to be something where we stimulate that future and encourage it, not to try and limit it. There are good regulations. Fit for 55, I think, will create economic signals in things like sustainable aviation fuels and hydrogen and shipping. CBAM helps Europe. So lots of good things in there that I think will have an impact. But individual countries have to translate those into local regulation. Things like managing grid tariffs when you're trying to stimulate hydrogen production, or even using multipliers to stimulate hydrogen production, are going to be crucial. Solar and wind was incentivized to a point it became the cheapest way to generate electricity. In the same way, we have to find the tools to stimulate hydrogen and biofuels to take that position as well. Mm-hmm. The PRR is a golden opportunity, I think, for us to build at scale new industries around hydrogen, around battery value chains, around EV charging. We should not squander this. We should not dilute this so everyone has a little bit. This is about creating industries for the future. But also for Europe, or Iberia particularly, it's attracting the best companies. There is a competition for the future of this future energy system. We recently did a joint venture with Northvolt, one of the largest battery manufacturers in Europe, to build a lithium hydroxide conversion facility. We're delighted to bring such a player into Portugal, into Iberia. Governments have to stimulate that, have to give the opportunities for those companies to come to locations like this so we can win that future. Now, that's the government role. What do companies have to do? Well, we have to set a clear purpose. We have to take bold steps. We have to anticipate the future and the future changes. Some of those things are not always obvious. We have to, certainly the companies like Galp, traditional companies, we have to become much more dynamic, much more agile, have an ability to fail and fail fast and learn quickly. We need to embrace digital. We have a system that will be a distributed energy system that we're going to have to glue together with digital solutions. And as Teresa said, partnership is going to be crucial. Partnership, particularly with tech companies, but partnership across our industry to work together to get the best what we can all offer, and building this circular economy. Lastly, I think companies have to do a better job to build relationships with society, but also with government in order to make sure that it does become a clear team effort. And for society, clearly choices and mobility and food, those are going to be important. But governments and companies have to make those choices easy for consumers. But my one kind of plea for society is to realize the footprint of our energy system will change. If you've ever been to West Texas and seen the Permian oil fields, you realize the existing system has a big footprint. But the new footprint is going to be wind turbines, is going to be solar arrays, is hopefully going to be some lithium mining in places like Iberia. It will have a footprint. People need to be compensated. There needs to be a just transition. But we cannot export all this activity to other countries and just ignore what's going on. I think John made a big point there. So for Galp, we're spending half our money on renewable and new energy solutions. We're a gigawatt today of renewable energy, going to 4 gigawatts 2025, 12 gigawatts by 2030. It is limited by the pace of approvals we're getting. We are looking to launch 200 megawatt green hydrogen projects, and then move more into hydrogen fuels, ammonia, sustainable aviation fuels, to make Sines, the only last refinery in Portugal, a green energy park. And then with Northvolt to try and bring a battery value chain to Portugal, to start with the lithium hydroxide conversion. So we're doing a number of things. We're changing the company, but we have to change our culture. We have to become more dynamic. We have to engage our society better. So this is a team sport, and the winner of this game is going to be the climate. But also the winner, hopefully, is also Iberia in terms of the jobs, in terms of the industrial growth, and winning this competition to be, a center of this new exciting industry. So, thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. It's clear from what you say that the winner is going to be the climate, and is also going to be the society, who is going to benefit from the development of technologies, the employment, the better quality of life, and so on. No? I like the way you describe very well, saying, okay, what the government should do and what the company should do. And in the case of companies, you clearly show it that Galp is totally in favor of Fit for 55, and that you are looking and acting aggressively to move toward more activity in the renewable generation, in new fuels with lower carbon intensity, hydrogen, circular economy, you mentioned, as well as other presenters. So, I mean, you are clearly committed to that. And you also mentioned that the government should stimulate the new energies and not demonize the old ones. And that's something that concerns me a lot, no? That in many cases, we are societies demonizing the old energies when, I mean, they are not really aware and they don't recognize what the old companies are doing to be present and active and contributing to the new energy, no? So, as you said, the government should, there's a need to create the right investment framework to allow the companies to compete in these low carbon segments, no? And there is also another message that you sent that was very clearly stated, the need for working together, no? So in this new purpose that help gas to regenerate the future together, what do you think are the key factors in the working together to achieve the European Fit for 55 ambitions?
Yeah, so, as I really emphasize it, we all have to play our role. Governments clearly have to play this role to create the economic signals for success. They need to, really work on incentivizing those new industries, in addition to renewables, but also new industries around hydrogen, around biofuels, to go down the cost curve. If they don't do that, we'll, as a little bit Teresa said, we'll all be saying great things, but not making enough progress. So governments, that relationship between governments and companies and this ability to build trust across that interface is going to be crucial. I think if we don't do that, we're not going to go fast enough. And again, companies have to reach out to governments and have a good dialogue around that, but companies also need to reach out to society. Again, I have particularly companies that traditional oil and gas companies are mistrusted. And I think our ability to communicate clearly, our ability to allow consumers to take choices by them understanding what is the CO2 footprint of what they buy. When you buy an electric vehicle and the battery is made in China, it's almost unpredictable how much CO2 went into that vehicle. Really is. So how do companies create an environment where we can label things to a point that consumers really make informed choices and are able, therefore, to live their lives as they want to, with solutions that also protect the climate? And I think that ability to have that complete joined up company, government, society, joint effort towards tackling climate change is the only way we're going to achieve it. 55 has a key purpose. It is not in itself enough. It has to be supplemented by very good regulation, very good relationships between companies and governments and people.
Good. So thank you very much, Andy. And now we are ready for the debate amongst the four presenters. I'm already seeing in the chat box that there are some questions coming in. Some of them will be interesting, very interesting to discuss. No, but my first question for the four panelists is, I would say, an overall assessment of the Fit for 55 package. No, will it enable the European Union to reach their 2030 and 2050 objectives, the 50% reduction on road transport emissions that they are aiming at? What is the legislation that is still needed to enable industry to make this journey? Which are the key contributions from the governments, the industry, and the society to ensure that we fulfill our ambition? What do you think about this overall assessment? Eh? So maybe starting in the same order with just Leon, and then we continue, and then we will reverse the order for other questions.
So, thank you, Ivan. As I said before, reflecting our ambition to reach climate neutrality, we fully support this climate target. And we think that this proposal included in the Fit for 55 package, we have the ability to give the right signals to the market, attracting investors and so on. So in this regard, we would like to call on European institutions to go on working in this direction in an open way, in a broader way, not excluding any technology. I think that is very important, because the challenge is really large. The ambition is very high, and we need every people, every industry, the whole talent of the industry we have in Europe working in that direction. If we talk about hydrogen, we have to be inclusive. We have to talk about green hydrogen coming from renewable power. We have to talk about renewable hydrogen coming from biogas, from wastes. Also, blue hydrogen coming from the previous capture of CO2 and produced with natural gas. Everything that could contribute to reduce the scope of the current emission level has to be, part of the solution. So in this sense, that is my main message, to evolve in the evolution of this Fit for 55 package. More technology. And
Andreas, do you agree or do you have a different point?
Excuse me?
Andreas, I was saying to Andreas whether you agree or you have a different point to make.
First, I listened very carefully how you phrased the question. The question was, will Fit for 55 enable? And yes, I think to that question, I would clearly say it's a fantastic enabler, but it's not a guarantee. I think in mathematics, there's also a necessary and a sufficient requirement. And this is the same here with Fit for 55. There are so many things that it's a good foundation, but so many things that need to be translated now into local regulations. I think, Andy, you said you would like to do more green projects, but you're stuck in you shake your head in consenting, and so the translation of this super relevant and good and great ambition that is defined via Fit for 55 into reality. And there's also one aspect I think we all have to learn is that cooperation between companies gets much better. We are a wind turbine company. I have honestly little clue what to do with hydrogen. The closest I can get, I can put an electrolyzer next to my machine, and then instead of electrons, I have hydrogen. But what to do with it, and what's the market for that, and how it gets into Andy and also John, you know so much more about it than I will ever know, and that we need to combine. It doesn't help if we try to imagine how could the hydrogen world look like, and you trying, how do I get green electricity? Only if we work together in a different way. And this is also something, I think, Andy, you said, we have to completely change. And so far it has been pretty, do I say, segmented or compartment, and you do this, we do that. I don't think that will be the future anymore.
Good. Teresa, you know a lot about molecules.
Well, I fully agree with Andrea that this package is an enabler, but it's not a warranty. And as normally happened, the devil is in the details. And let me give you just one example. I think that all of us are asking ourselves if will there be sufficient renewable electricity for this energy transition. And when we are talking about hydrogen production, if we go to the delegated act, well, that could be too much restrictive. That means that if we don't have a flexible delegated act, we can create unnecessary barriers for new electrolyzers projects. This is just one detail, but I think this is the kind of things that we should to be aware, and to have a regulation that is that provide the legislative framework but doesn't restrict the business to run. That means that huge investment need to be made. A lot of private industries and companies are ready to invest, and I think that more than ever, that we have we need a legislative framework that really support that.
Good. Andy, anything to add?
Yeah, look, it's a good start. It's a translation to local regulations. You have to stimulate, you have to give a price signal for people to invest. What's going to happen, though, is companies like airlines will actually set targets that are higher than 55. So, companies will, I think, push the boundaries of that. Will be the success. It won't be, what the European Union can do is, set that journey, but it's then the commercial entities that will have to take that on and actually stretch the targets further. I think only in that way will you get to the 55.
Good. In the previous section, Vice President Timmermans made a comment about carbon leakage. No? And as you all know, the European Commission has proposed a carbon border adjustment mechanism to increase the climate ambition, while at the same time enabling European industry to remain competitive. Do you believe the proposed carbon border adjustment mechanism will help to level the playing field between the European Union producers and the foreign producers?
The problem, Ivan, is that in time terms, this carbon border adjustment mechanism and the current CO2 prices are not aligned. Today, what we have seen in Europe in terms of carbon price is impacting in a very negative way in many European industrial sectors on top of on consumers. So what could happen? That leakage could be and is a reality. And let me say that exporting industrial plants and exporting industrial jobs is catastrophic, but not only, I mean, from the social and economic point of view, also from the climate point of view, because these plants that are going to produce steel, cement, and some other products in China that we, after that, import, are going to emit the same or more, because normally they are less efficient than European plants, carbon dioxide. And what we are doing is increasing the climate problem in the world. I mean, if today we take two single sectors in China, cement and the steel sector combined, the CO2 emission combined of these two Chinese sectors is equivalent to the whole European CO2 emissions, including all sectors, transport, industry, home emissions, and so on. So we are sweeping the CO2 emissions under the carpet. Sometimes what we are doing in Europe is greenwashing. We are happy because we say we are reducing emissions in Europe, it's okay, but we are exporting these emissions to some other parts of the world. So the carbon adjustment mechanism is fully necessary, and we are today living an energy emergency in Europe with these high prices, and as long as this energy emergency lasts, we have to stop this financial speculation on carbon rights, because I mean a lot of investment funds and so on are making money today with these CO2 rights in Europe. Prices are high, but are not incentivizing the reduction of CO2 emissions, are impacting in a negative way on consumers, and are boosting the effect of exporting industrial jobs to some other areas. So we need a framework fully aligned among the carbon price and the carbon border adjustment mechanism to be efficient in terms of cope with climate change.
Andreas, you are competing with companies all over the world. What will be your evaluation or your beliefs around these carbon border adjustment mechanism?
Yeah, I did not look into the direct effect that the carbon border mechanism could have, because at the moment the competition is playing on a completely different turf rather than this. Whether that influences us or not, honestly, I can't say. What I can see at the moment is that we have a European industry in my sector again, that knows how to make wind turbines, that also invested a lot into R&D, and we talk a lot about China, and I think we have to be careful that the Chinese not the same effect happens that happened in solar, that we started it, we also prepared the grounds with Fit for 55 and all other packages that we have in Europe, and suddenly the European industry is gone. Of course, we as an industry do everything to prevent that. But on the other hand, it happened to solar. So far, we've been always able to win against Chinese competition, also because of it's a long-term investment. There are good reasons for that, and I believe that we can also do that in the future. But we need to be careful that this global competition does not get imbalanced.
Good. Just for the audience, on February the 3rd, EsadeGeo will organize again one seminar that will focus on this carbon border adjustment mechanism. So you will have the opportunity to go into much more detail on this. Another topic that we should cover, because I mean, it's the topic that everybody is talking, both in the industry and also in social meetings, is hydrogen. No, and hydrogen. The European Union has a very ambitious renewable energy directive, RED III, There is a binding obligation that is proposed to member states to achieve 50% share of renewable hydrogen in the final energy and non-energy purpose by 2030. Are these binding targets key to create additional demand in green hydrogen in Europe? Maybe we should start with Teresa and then Andy.
Well, clearly, Ivan, this binding target will help, but we have to be realistic. It will be difficult to reach this target without renewable energy and also competitive hydrogen production capacity on the field. As I said before, for example, with the delegated act, if this create unnecessary barriers for new electrolyzer project, will be a problem. Air Liquide, we support additionality criteria, but we are convinced that the system of a PPA with a renewable power asset before the start of operation is enough proof of additionality. So we need some flexibility to really have the renewable energy that we need and also the hydrogen production capacity on the field. And we welcome the increased ambition of the Commission, but to have some objectives without investment in place at the right time will be quite difficult. It is essential that there are a lot of projects pre-notified by the member state that can be reviewed, and that if the decision arrives as soon as possible, that will be an accelerator. Industry is ready to invest, but we need some green light to support this investment at this stage of the learning curve. And we need some support in the CapEx and also in the OpEx. And as we said before, without competitive renewable energy, it will be very difficult to reach this target. So it's essential to develop first the production capacity project, and the construction of transport infrastructures will be arriving in a second phase as the market develops.
Good. Andy.
Yeah, well, I'm a great believer in hydrogen personally. In my time between Shell and Galp, I worked with a startup company, Zero Avia, that were into hydrogen fuel cell aviation. Are doing great. We'll go commercial soon. So I think there's lots of innovation around this. European Fit for 55 can stimulate that, can set some targets that allows us to give some price signals. But my belief is hydrogen will take off with the right stimulants, and will start to really compete in cost when it gets below, let's say, $2 a kilogram in the fuel mix. Refineries and the greater green transition of refineries is going to be a key. This is where it really goes at scale. And clearly offsetting CO2 taxation, high cost of gas at the moment, this has an opportunity to be in the money. And that is the little bit, the stimulus we need to make this into a mainstream business. Because I think it then really starts touching on sustainable fuels, particularly aviation and shipping, but also heavy duty transport. And then, of course, into industry, into steel and other things. So I think the refinery is that control point, that central control point that will get this to scale. Mm-hmm. And the European Union has to make sure that in countries, the local regulations are positioned so that that becomes an attractive investment. And if we can do that, I'm very hoping by 2030, we're going to have very competitive cost green hydrogen that will have a major impact on our energy system.
Good. Jocelyn, you launched this week the SHINE initiative. Any further comment?
I mean, I fully agree, Teresa and Andy's view. Only let me add 2 comments, trying to answer a question that was put on the table by Andreas about the potential evolution of power prices. I think that if we want, and we are fully committed to push in favor of hydrogen, we also need some kind of transition framework to put on the table the conditions to make this hydrogen competitive. Of course, we have to do our task in the companies. We have to work together in clusters, companies like Galp, like Siemens Gamesa, like Air Liquide, like Repsol, trying to accelerate the evolution, the demand, and so on of all that. But we need really push the power prices down to make the hydrogen competitive. We have to reduce the burden of tolls for distribution, transport, and so on that the current electricity regulation has today. I mean, it's hard to imagine that at the current power price, you could produce like competitive hydrogen. We are committed to do that, but we are going to need a regulatory push to make that possible. And of course, working together, the companies to accelerate the technological evolution. Saying that, there is a question from the public asking about the possibility to build an international market for hydrogen. I think that has to be possible. I think that countries like Portugal, Spain, and France, we have to work together building corridors to push in favor of this technology, this hydrogen in industrial sectors are also in mobility.
Final question from my side. You all mentioned at different points in your conversation about the need for collaboration. And here we have this group who is very diverse because you come from different angles of the energy sector. So my question will be, and please a short answer because we are running out of time. What opportunities are there for collaboration between renewable energy companies and energy companies with more diversified portfolios to accelerate the energy transition? Opportunities for collaboration.
Well, I mean, sorry, but I think that we are collaborating. That's great. I mean, we collaborate with Siemens Gamesa together to push renewable energy in Spain and in some other countries. Galp and Repsol, we collaborate to decarbonize together our industrial sites. We cooperate with Air Liquide, and I'm sure that they are cooperating among them. So that is needed, but fortunately, I think that is a reality.
If I just could to say, I mean, renewable, if I think of renewable companies as in the traditional utilities that move to renewable companies and companies like Repsol and Galp, I think these companies actually meet in the middle. We're starting to merge. We're doing more renewables. Everyone's doing hydrogen. So yeah, it just becomes a single ecosystem, actually. And it used to be very segregated. Now we're really coming together. And hopefully we'll have as much partnership as we'll have competition.
Good. Any further points from Andreas or Teresa?
Yeah, and I can also, sorry, you go, Teresa, sorry.
No, please, Andrea.
Yeah, I think I can also give an excellent example where we have been also working with the oil and gas industry in the past on not only on hydrogen, but also on floating wind. Our first floater that we did more than 10 years ago was with a foundation concept developed by Equinor. And in the meantime, the turbine has even been dismantled because all the learnings have been done. So there is a huge knowledge, and again, that's something I don't know nothing about floating foundations. I know about wind turbines, but oil and gas company knows so much more about other fields, and that has been in a great success. And I think was one of the nucleus or sparks to get floating. I was about to say off the ground, probably the wrong words, but into the sea.
Teresa.
I just wanted to add that, as José John says, that we are all collaborating. For example, for Air Liquide in the Innovation Fund, the selected, the chosen project, we were very lucky for project, and all of them with other industrial groups is a good example. But I think that probably some years ago, collaboration was nice to have. Now it's mandatory.
Good. So it is clear that you are all committed to energy transition, you are all acting on energy transition, and you are all collaborating to develop the technologies and to serve the needs of the society. So this is great news. And I think this is a good summary of the panel. I would like to take one question from the audience, and then I would like to ask you a final question. No? There is one question that says whether we believe there is a possibility for international hydrogen market producing somewhere cheaper and importing to Europe if the local production is not sufficient. This question comes from Guido Mazza. Who can answer this?
I'll give an answer to that. I think absolutely there will become an international market in hydrogen. A lot of hydrogen will be delivered through pipelines, but there will be a lot of international trade. I think I read a recent report that up to 40% will be international. And there will be parts of the world where green hydrogen will be more competitive. Particularly places like Chile, Brazil, and in places like the Middle East. So I think this will become a tradable commodity. It will be in different forms. So it may well be ammonia or other carriers rather than, let's say, liquid hydrogen. But that's a fascinating opportunity in business that I think will emerge over a period of time, and it will become internationally tradable, these products.
Good. And let me be optimistic. I think that we have conditions in Spain, natural resources, great companies like Siemens Gamesa and some others, to be a leader in renewable production and to export hydrogen to some other countries, and even to be a hub, Spain and Portugal together, taking advantage of our position connected to Northern Africa, to be a hub to produce and to distribute hydrogen towards Europe. I think that in Spain and Portugal, the Iberian Peninsula, we have to have the ambition to lead the hydrogen market in Europe. We have ambition, we have great companies to do that, we have natural resources, and cooperating together, I think that we could get this target. Yes.
And if I can just add, the LCOEs of the renewable energy in southern Iberia is some of the most competitive in the whole of Europe. And so this is the key to a hydrogen business.
Good. So on that optimistic note, let me ask you the final question. And now we live in a world of headlines, we live in a world of tweets. So I would like to ask you a 30 seconds tweet or a headline on this question. What will be the major impact of Fit for 55 for your specific industry? And maybe we can start on the reverse order. So starting by Galp, Air Liquide, Siemens, and then finally Repsol. So Andy, your headline.
Yeah, Fit for 55 enables us to regenerate the future together.
Good. Teresa?
Well, Europe needs a workable and market-driven approach to ensure the European Union climate ambitions become a reality, and delivering for example, the European hydrogen strategy and also energy sovereignty is a paramount, especially in the background of the current energy price crisis, and it's the time to go.
Well, the energy price crisis is something that deserves a full debate.
Sure.
Andreas.
No, the I noticed. The dream headline that I would like to see combining, let's say, all of what we said would be the first 1,000 megawatt hydrogen offshore wind turbine on floating foundations opened by, and then you choose the Spanish king, the Danish queen, I don't care. The first 1,000 megawatt floating hydrogen offshore. Then we've made it.
Okay. We all hope to see that headline.
Yeah.
Finally, Yosuyon.
A tool to decarbonize our society and our companies, preserving the competitiveness of the European industry. That is Fit for 55 for me.
Good. So thank you very much to all of you. I mean, I like your enthusiasm, I like your passion for the topic, and also your commitment, your real commitment. So this is not greenwashing, this is a reality, no? And that is very optimistic for the future. Just a final reminder, we have another session on Tuesday next week on how to de-risk the energy transition. And I would like to thank our 4 excellent speakers for their time today and for providing their very interesting views. And also I would like to thank EIT InnoEnergy and the European Commission representation in Madrid for their support in this event. Thank you very much to all of you. Congratulations to the presenters. And we could have been talking for another half an hour easily. Thank you very much.